morning. Nice to see you guys. We're in the midst, actually we're not in the midst, we are in between two series right now. And so I got the opportunity to think about what would be something that I'd love to teach through and I think would be important to talk about today. And so we get to do that. I want to share a passage that has ministered to me in a big way, that I hope ministers to you, and that I think is incredibly relevant to just who and where we are as a people, as a culture, all the things right now. So I'm glad I get to teach with y'all today. I was shopping in a grocery store, and I'm standing in the produce section, and there's this mom, and she's walking around with her kid. And she's pushing the cart, and this little boy is running around, and he keeps grabbing things, and she's like, don't touch that, put that back, stop that, don't do that. Like all the things while this uncontained kind of energy is just bouncing around doing all this amazing stuff. And I can tell it's a lot for her. Her cart's like half full of groceries. It looks like she's probably already been through the grocery store. This is the end type of a thing. And she has survived to this point. And the kid keeps doing stuff, and so she doesn't know how to contain him. If you've ever been a parent in that space where you're just like, I just need you not to be mobile anymore. And so you grab the child, and she does this, and she picks him up, and she puts him in that little cage-like contraption that we call the grocery cart with the little holes for the legs and all that. And she puts him in there, and he's sitting in the cart, and he doesn't want to be there at all. In fact, he's now amping up, and you can look and you're like, uh-oh, it's about to happen. It's kind of like, if you study volcanoes and you just start feeling the things moving and you see the meters starting to move and you're like, this isn't going to go well pretty soon. That's what's happening. And she looks at him and she tries to calm him down, and she tries to get him to stop doing things. And everything she does he keeps escalating. And eventually he just starts reaching behind him. He reaches into the cart and he starts throwing things out of the cart into the grocery. This is full on fit mode now, right? Throwing things out of the cart, and she panics because you can't be a parent in a grocery store while your kid's chucking groceries around. This, it's not going to go well for you. And so she immediately panics and runs and starts picking things up because, they can't be on the ground and putting them in the cart. And the kid just grabs more and starts throwing it. And then she grabs more and she looks up and she and I make eye contact. And it's that moment as a parent where you realize I am not alone and I have an audience. And she freaks out. She looks at me and you can see the embarrassment in her face and the frustration and the panic. And she looks around and she realizes there's several other people holding shopping carts that are all watching this moment. And this mom now starts to panic herself, and she runs over and she doesn't know what to do. And she grabs the kid. She does the only thing she can think to do. She grabs the kid under both arms, picks him up, hugs him in. He immediately starts flailing and arching his back, that thing that makes you want to drop your kid. You know what I'm talking about? And she's holding him now, and she goes, no, and just runs out of the grocery store, just gone. She goes out the front doors, and her cart's got perishables, frozen things, all kinds of the work she's already done in it, and it does not matter. She's gone, and she is not coming back. If you've ever walked through the grocery store and you've seen an empty cart and it looks like the rapture happened, I think this is what it is, you guys. I think it's some parent just had to survive a moment and they blitzed out of there. Now, I share this because if you have ever been in a situation with a toddler, right? My professors in my old child development classes used to say, never get into a power struggle with a toddler unless you want to realize how powerless you are. And it's because everything you do just doesn't seem to work and all of that stuff. As a parent or as people, it's so clear when you look at a kid, if you've ever watched them pitch a fit, where they just lose their minds. You can actually call it that. You watch this person where you're like, I think you should stop talking rationally to that person. I don't think that that's going to help. They have lost their minds, right? That's what actually occurs. And to be honest, this is what occurs to us as adults too. My professors used to call this when we get stuck in our lizard brains. I don't know if you've ever heard that before. We get stuck in our lizard brains. And if you haven't, I want to take a moment to explain something to us that's going to help us as we walk through a passage when we get to Psalm 46, which is where we're headed in just a little bit. But I want to explain this idea of lizard brain, because this is our biology. This is true for every person in this room. This is true for all of us. So here's what I want to do. I want you to take your hands and I want you to put them right here on your forehead. I know it's kind of weird, I get it. And if you're new here today, no, we're not in a cult. This is just a moment, right? So you put your hands on your forehead, right behind your skull, right here. This is the area of your brain called the prefrontal cortex. You can go ahead and put your hands down, but I want you to remember that. This is where this is. Your prefrontal cortex is the part of your brain that is responsible for all of your executive functions. And better way to say that is everything you think of that makes you you, right here. It's happening right here. When you think about your personality, right here. When you think about your decision-making skills, right here. When you think about the values that you hold, the things that are most important to you, right here. When you think about what it means to be a person who believes in God, who is God? What does that mean? How does this work in my life? What are my deepest cares? What's my learning? All of the things that matter, all right here. Right? This is your wise brain. This is the piece where all of that executive function and all of that stuff exists. That's all your prefrontal cortex. Fun fact, that doesn't fully develop until you're age 25. So if you've ever looked at like a college student or a high schooler and you're like, why did you do that? And they're like, I don't know. They're being more honest than you think sometimes, right? Like they're working on all of that. That's still growing. Now, I want you to take one hand, I want you to reach behind to the top of your spinal column, base of your skull, and just go ahead and rest it there for just a second. Okay, right there at the top of your spinal column, at the base of your skull, there's an almond-sized thing called your amygdala. You can go ahead and put your hands down now. There's an almond-sized thing sitting right at the top of the spinal column, between the spinal column and the brain, called the amygdala. And it sits at the top of all that information network that we call our spinal column. So when the body's communicating all the sensory experiences and all the things that are happening and all that stuff up to your brain, it first passes through this little almond-sized thing called your amygdala. And your amygdala is responsible for threat detection. It is your threat detection system. That's why it's right at the top of all those nerve endings. I have watched an amygdala save someone's life before. I have on multiple occasions, and it's because if you've ever lived in a big city, I lived in Chicago, taxi cabs and bus drivers, they will hit you. Like they will run you over. It is a real thing. And I have watched people walk out into the road without looking, and someone behind them notices the movement, and without even thinking, without skipping a beat, someone will grab someone by the back of the shirt and pull them off of the street and literally save their lives in a moment. And it's because this is your threat detection system. It is responsible for moments where you fight, moments where you flight, AKA fleeing, running away, getting out of there, or even when you overwhelm so much that you will freeze because you just have to get through a moment. This is all part of your threat detection system. If you have ever been a person in a car and maybe you are a parent who is driving, maybe you had a parent who is driving, and all of a sudden somebody pulled out and did something crazy in traffic and they hit their brakes, and even though you were wearing a seatbelt, you suddenly got a second piece of resistance, an arm suddenly flies out and like hits you in the chest as though it's gonna stop anything, right? That moment, and then it kind of hurts because sometimes they kind of hit you and you look and you go, why did you hit me? Why did you do that? And they go, I don't know, I was trying to protect you. And you're like, what were you, that wasn't gonna do anything. What were you thinking? Well, they weren't. In that moment, they detected a threat. They detected something potentially harmful. It flooded up through their spinal column, and it hit right here. It took over the brain. It flooded their brain. So now everything came down to three possibilities: fight, flight, or flee. And this was fight. We're gonna fight against the oncoming thing. We're gonna stop this. I'm gonna protect you. They didn't even think about it. They did it instinctively because that's what happens when you're in an amygdala hijack. Now, that's like the most primal way of thinking. It's the most primal part of your brain. It's like a reptilian brain. That is why my professors would refer to this as getting stuck in your lizard brain. It is when you quite literally lose your mind because you're facing a threat. And it hijacks everything else, and you begin acting and you begin operating in a way that is all about fight, flight, or freeze. I gotta get out of this threat. I gotta get away from this thing. I've gotta overcome it. I've gotta do something so that this doesn't exist anymore. Think of that kid in the grocery store. As he starts to escalate, and his mom's doing all these things, and everything starts to escalate, all of a sudden he loses his mind. And all he can think of is fight, 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 right? I'm gonna keep going, I'm gonna throw groceries, I'm gonna escalate, I'm gonna get crazy. And that's gonna happen. But you know who else lost their mind a little bit? Mom. And there's no judgment here, this happens to a lot of us, but you know what she did? The moment she saw me and she realized she wasn't by herself in that grocery store, she got scared. And she literally was like, I can't be here, this can't happen, this isn't okay. And you know what she did? This little almond-sized thing called the amygdala, or little lizard brain, took over and it said, get out of there, flee, flee, flee. And so she grabbed her kid, she ran and left all of her groceries. Now guys, think about this for a second. As a mom There's a dad, if you've ever tried to get your kid ready to go to a grocery store at that age, that's not a small feat, is it, when you do that? And if you've made your way through the whole store and you filled a basket full of goods and you've shopped around and you've done that, that mattered. You had a list. You're trying to take care of things for the week. You had all this stuff to get done. To leave a full grocery cart in the middle of the store because you fled out of there, I guarantee when that mom got home, she's like, what are we going to do? I got to go back now. Not to that store, though. Right? It messes with you. When we lose our minds because we get flooded by threats and this takes over, we lose the best of who we are. We stop functioning in our brains and the things of what matters most. And it starts to mess with us. It's easy to think about with a mom and a child in a grocery store, but let me ask you, what do you think happens when you open your news feed and every article you scroll through is talking about some economic collapse, some global conflict, some national tension, some other piece of conflict that's existing, or earthquakes, fires, tornadoes, natural disasters, or if you don't read this article, you'll miss the 4 things that you'll die if you don't know, which are like everywhere, right? What do you think's happening as you scroll through? You think you're just scrolling on your phone, but do you know what your phone's communicating to you the whole time? Threat, 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 right? It's a constant temptation to flood our brains with this fight or flight thing. And then you're like, well, I need to know more. I won't survive it. I need to understand more about this or I won't get it. I need to have more. And it becomes this thing that starts, you can actually feel it take over a little bit. Or maybe you have a news channel running in the background, or you've got some other piece that's happening all of the time. Each of those things are threatening. They create fear and uncertainty. They create worry. You can feel it hijacking your brain, who you are at some point. We can lose our minds a little bit. Friends, what do you think happens when we live in a culture where we're constantly conditioned to see the people around us as, do they agree with me or do they disagree with me? Are they for me or are they against me? Are they enemy or are they friends? You know what we're really doing when we walk around like that? Threat. Are you a threat? Threat. Threat. And we flood our brains. We start to program our behaviors and things in a way that naturally works through our biology, the way that God created us, where this thing that was supposed to save us from getting hit by buses and taxi cab drivers is now being activated all of the time. And it can be an exhausting way to live where we lose our minds. We live out of our reptile brains. Or what happens when we have a tension or a conflict in our marriages or in our relationships that matter to us, our friendships, or our coworkers, right? And our bosses. And these are the places and spaces we spend the most amount of time with the people that we tend to care the most about. And all of a sudden we approach those relationships from the perspective of, it's a fight to have. It's an obstacle to overcome. It's a person that is difficult and it's an enemy. It's somebody other. It's something that I have to get over and work through or undermine or threat, right? And it floods our brains and we start to act and we start to operate in ways that aren't our best selves because your reptile brain isn't you. It's an almond-sized thing at the base of at the top of your spinal column that's designed to save you during threats. You're right here. You're in your wise brain, the things that you know, what matters most, who you really are. See, when we don't wrestle with this, when we don't pay attention to this, and we just behaviorally start to live out of this other thing, it robs us from living in our right minds. And how are we supposed to be the people that God created us to be if we turn into more an animalistic, reptilian version of ourselves? There's a higher calling on you. There's a higher calling on me and on our lives because God made us this way. God made us unique in this. You have the ability to do so many amazing things with that incredible brain of yours. God did not create us to live in our lizard brain 24/7. It is actually harmful to you. From an anxious state, from a heart state, it will harm your relationships to stay in a threat state all of the time. And the good news is we don't have to, even here, even now. He invites us to be still and to know in our wise minds and in our very wise hearts that he is God. And that's what we're going to get to talk about today. And it's this beautiful moment. And we're going to find it in Psalms 46. We're going to read through this whole psalm together. So if you've never read a psalm before, you're going to get to read one and we'll talk our way through it. Psalm 46 is categorized as a psalm of confidence. And I love that. This is written during a time that's complicated for the Jewish people. We don't know this for certain, but it is believed that this was written during a time where they were being invaded by the Assyrian army. And so this is not written at a time where you're just like, everything's really great. We should just write amazing poetry and celebrate the greatness of this life. That's not what's happening. This is written when they are under threat. This is written when they look out and they see an army approaching. This is written when they have real enemies, real tensions, real fears, real things. Life is crazy, and they're worried about all of this. This is written amidst those types of moments, and this is why it's called a psalm of confidence. A psalm of confidence is a thing that you read or you sing if you're in this culture, and it centers you and your people back into the larger story so that you don't function out of here and you live out of here. We get our wise minds and our wise brains back. We don't lose our minds, right, as we go. They give us that sense of confidence and that sense of grounding in the moments that matter. And I just think that's a little relevant for us today. And I think that that's helpful and kind that exists in the scriptures. And I'm so glad we get to read through this. Psalm 46, we're going to begin at verse 1. It says, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear though the earth give way, though the mountains be moved into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, though the mountains tremble at its swelling. See, the psalmist, he gives us something. I love the way he starts this, because the way he starts this psalm, he gives us something to anchor to. It's like this powerful truth that you get to hold on to right off of the bat. And he says this, our God is our refuge, God is our strength, and he's a very present help in trouble. Think about this. A refuge, by definition, is a place that you feel safe in, isn't it? Right? There can be a world that's swirling around you. There can be chaos going on around you. But if you're in a refuge, if you have refuge someplace, it's a place, despite the chaos, that you actually can find asylum. You can find safety, and you can recover, and your heart can recover. Your brain can recover. Your body can recover. It's a place to rest. It's a place of safety. This is God. Think of what it means when we say God is our strength. I'm not sure what all the lyrics to the songs were this morning, but it's highly likely that we sang at some point that God was our strength. That is such a common theme throughout worship music that we declare and sing out. Have you ever thought about what does it mean when we say God is our strength? Right? Maybe a way of thinking about it is, have you ever looked at a moment in your life that you thought was really big or really heavy? And in light of the big thing or the heavy thing, you kind of felt small, and you looked and you're like, I think I might be too weak to carry that or to walk through that. And then you realize in that moment that despite the fact that this is big or small or whatever size it is, that the God of the universe, in your strength, he is also giving you his strength. And that there's moments where you can carry that which you didn't think you could. You can step into that which you didn't think you could, because the strength of God is actually there empowering you, and he's with you. God is our strength. That is such a big sentence. And this passage is essentially directing us. We don't have to fear weakness. We don't have to fear these pieces. We have refuge in God. He is our strength. He is our present help in times of trouble, which is like a way of saying he is with us and he is for us, right? So this is how the psalmist starts. He wants us to know this. He's our refuge. He's our strength. He's with us and he's for us. And it's really good that he said all of that, because the stuff he writes after this is crazy. It is. When you read through the imagery that he writes after this, if we didn't have that first part, this would be called a psalm of panic. It would. Listen, therefore we will not fear though the earth give way, though the mountains be moved into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, though the mountains tremble at its swelling. The first 3 verses in this psalm are all designed to speak to us, the reader, and go, there's going to be moments that you face where the world feels chaotic. The natural world around you that you can't control feels like chaos. And he speaks to it. Think about it. I know it's poetic language, but the author's trying to say these are kind of a big deal. They would normally scare us. And if you're in your head right now and you're not feeling that, imagine if I stood in front of you and I said, I have it on good authority, and you believed me, that in just a few moments there's going to be a giant earthquake here in Tucson. It's going to leave open fissures throughout the city. Like, this is going to be a very, very big deal, cause widespread amounts of damage. It will also allow for landslides in different pieces. In fact, I think we're going to watch the front face of Push Ridge just kind of fall off and crumble down and hopefully not mess with the houses and the things that exist below it. On top of that, there's crazy storm that's supposed to come through. We should anticipate significant flooding by later this evening. The Santa Cruz and the Rito are going to overflow and cause widespread damage and chaos throughout this city. But it's okay. I'm really glad glad you're here at church. It's good to have you. Now imagine if I did that. You'd all start freaking out. You wouldn't sit here and be like, no worries, everybody stay calm, we're in our seats, it's fine. We would go into a panic because that's huge stuff. That's big and it's scary. This is the language that the psalmist used. And yet he says, we aren't afraid. We will not fear. How is that possible? Like, how is that not just wishful thinking? I want you to think back. There's a really strong correlation. I'll just tell you this ahead of time. There's a really strong correlation between the language that the author uses in Psalm 46 and the language that the author uses in the opening 2 chapters of the very first book of the Bible in Genesis. And these two hearken back to each other in a way. And so what's going to happen is he starts to recall this creator God in this powerful way. The first verse in the entire Bible, first chapter and the first verse in the entire Bible, friends, it begins this way. It says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void. And darkness was over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. That's Genesis chapter 1, verses 1 through 2. When it says that the earth was without form and void, some of your Bibles will say it was the formless void, right? It'll label it this way. What's being illustrated there in that Hebrew poetry that it's trying to show us is it's chaos. It's that which has no order. It's that which is swirling. It's this idea of chaos that's existing in there, in the formless void. And amidst the chaos, there's also what? There's this darkness there. And how does God feel about it? Well, God's fine. The Spirit of God is what? Hovering over the waters, hovering over this. And then God does this really powerful thing. He looks into the chaos of the moment. He looks into all of that, and he looks into the darkness, and he says, let there be light. And he speaks order, and he speaks purpose into that which had been chaotic and formless before, and suddenly it takes shape. And he speaks light into the midst of the darkness. From the very beginning of the scriptures, the opening of the entire Bible wants you to understand and know that there is a God who looks into the chaos and he speaks order and purpose in it. That there is a God who looks into darkness and fills it with light. Right at the very, very beginning. And the psalmist in Psalms 46 is saying, that God who stands above all the natural disaster, who stands above the natural order, that God who created all of these things, that God who looks into the chaos and says, no, may there be order and may there be purpose. That God who looks into the darkness and says, may there be a little light. That God is your refuge. That God is your safe place, your place to recover and to take refuge in. That God is your strength in the moments that you feel weak. The God who spoke all of this into being. That God is with you and he is for you. Then the text says, therefore, we shall not fear when the earth opens up and shakes. We shall not fear because there is a God who is bigger than the earth itself. There is a God whose power speaks order and purpose into all of it. So take refuge, friends. See, this is a psalm of confidence. Another way to put this is, we don't have to live here, do we? We can stay here. That God is my refuge and my strength. He is with me and he is for me. It doesn't take what I walk through away, but it changes how I walk through it, right? That's what he's getting at. The God of the universe. And I just hope you see this. God, friends, whatever chaos you stare into in the world around you, whatever darkness you feel like exists in the world around you, the God who speaks order and purpose into all of creation is the same God who speaks into your life. And the same God who is with you and for you. The God who brings light into the midst of darkness is the same God who is with you and for you. May that bring you confidence. The psalmist continues though. Psalm 46, continuing verse 4 through 7. Now here he's going to shift away from the natural world of chaos and things that we can't control to all of a sudden the nations and the things that are happening in there that are chaotic that we can't control. He says, there's a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy habitation of the Most High. God is in the midst of her. She shall not be moved. God will help her when morning dawns. The nations rage, the kingdoms totter. He utters his voice, the earth melts. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. So you see, he's moving away from like the natural disaster type of language to now he's talking about like the nations roaring and the things teetering and tottering and all of this feeling a little crazy around us. So verse 4 begins with this imagery that again takes the reader back to these origin stories with God, in the origin of the earth, back in Genesis. There's a river whose streams make glad the city of God. Genesis chapter 2, verses 10, it said this about the Garden of Eden, friends. A river flowed out of Eden to water the garden, and there it divided and became 4 rivers. And in Genesis, it goes on to talk about the blessings and the gifts that these rivers create and flow through, just like the psalmist does in verse 4. Then in verse 5 of the psalm, we're told about a city, this location, so to speak, of whatever this looks like. And remember, this is poetic language. And what are we told about this place? God is in the midst of her. Now that language makes an early Jewish person go straight back to the Garden of Eden. Guys, if you're familiar with the story of the Garden of Eden in the book of Genesis, what was in the midst of the garden? What is described as being in the center of that garden in Eden? The tree of life. Life with God. Right there in the midst of the garden. And what does this tell us? God is in the midst of her, so she shall not be moved. It's describing this location where life with God is at the center as an anchor for this place that's in. And then all of a sudden it's like, and that's really, really important because everything's swirling outside of it. The writer's trying to get us to think about the Garden of Eden, a place where life with God is at the very center of it all. We've read that God is our refuge. We've read that God is our strength. We've read that he's with us and that he's for us. And now there's this passage here talking about how where he's in the midst of it, anchoring it, centering it. Why does that matter? Well, it's huge because the nations are teetering and tottering and roaring and crazy, and the world feels nuts around us, and everything just feels crazy. It can feel like that sometimes, can't it? It can feel like unanchored. It can feel like we're in a raft just bumping our way down a canyon, hoping we don't sink is what it can feel like. It doesn't always feel like the Garden of Eden, but you know what's interesting? The way the writer's writing this, the way the psalmist is portraying this is he wants us to think of a Garden of Eden as something that's actually available to us. In a manner of speaking. You can actually live your life in this very real world, in your very real life, where God is at the center of your garden, anchored with deep roots, where he holds you steady, serves like that refuge and like that strength, so that you don't actually make something else become the center of your garden and cause you to be in a swirl going down a canyon that you can't control type of a thing, where you just feel out of control, chaos, right? Because the nations rage, the kingdoms of this world totter. He utters his voice and it all melts away. Let me summarize all the complexity in the language this way. This is the way that I would articulate this. You can live your life based on the teeter-totter of national politics, of international conflict, of constantly scanning the news, your social media, and the globe at large for the threats and the chaos that swirl around you in your very real life in this very real world. But if you base your life on that, if that becomes the center of your life, it will take what could have looked more like the Garden of Eden and turn it into what now looks and feels a little more like hell on earth, to use that illustration, friends. Because that's not what holds us in our center. In this last year, my wife and I, we began to recognize this pattern in our relationship. It's one of those weird moments where we've been married a really long time, and sometimes you just get used to being and doing, and every now and then you pause and you're like, oh, there's like this change that's occurred, or there's this pattern that's started to happen. See, she's my favorite person in the world. She's my favorite person in the world, and she's who I've chosen to spend my life with, and I get to grow with her, learn with her, and delight in who she is and discover who she continues to be. And she's signed up to do that same endeavor with me, which is awesome, right? We get to do this, but on occasion, you miss each other. On occasion, things get weird. At some point, we began to notice that our conversation had shifted a little bit. She would read an article in the news or watch something on the television or something, become aware of something that was happening in the world around us. And it would create a sense of tension or create a sense of fear in her. And so we'd talk about it and we'd talk about it. Or I would experience a problem that I was facing that I felt like I couldn't overcome, or it was just like big and complicated and I was frustrated. And so we would talk about it and we would talk about it. And all that's good because you want to be able to take the things that are most difficult in life and communicate that with the person you care about most. You want to be known in that way. You want to be able to say, this is what scares me, this is what bothers me. You want to be seen and known in that way. That's important. But here's what happened. The pattern that started to shift is started to recognize this was the bulk of what we were talking about. This actually started to become the center of so many of our conversations and our moments. And without realizing it, it felt like the majority of our time was suddenly spent venting or complaining or lamenting about what wasn't working, what wasn't happening, or chaos and things around us, or the problems that existed in my world or her world, or things that we couldn't solve or that just felt too big to handle. And that became the center of what it was that was connecting us. I get home, we love to have a conversation when each other gets home. It's just like, how's your day? What's going on? And let's talk through and things. And that just became the bulk of what it was that we were talking about. And you know what started to happen in that? I think in some ways we started to just, without even realizing it, without even knowing it, we started to make fears and problems become more the center of our relationship. And we stopped connecting and sharing the deeper desires of our hearts with one another. Of what is God doing in you and through you? What's God teaching you right now? What's the things that you're delighting in? What's the things that you're lamenting in? What's happening in you as I connect with you? There's all kinds of things I can connect with in the world around you, but this is my person. How do I know you and be with you? How do we best love and care for one another? And as God tells us to love and care for others, what's that look like for us? And where are our hearts in all of these things? We stopped connecting on all the things that actually make a relationship beautiful, because at the center of our garden was tension and fear and frustration, because the world feels like a swirl sometimes around us, and it's easy to take the swirl and jump into the center of it and make it the center of you. You don't even know that you did it. It just accidentally starts to happen. And it doesn't just have to be the world around you, friends. We sometimes do this in relationships where it's just like maybe you've been going through a problem, or there's an issue, or there's a struggle, and the struggle becomes the only thing that you talk about or focus on, and it becomes the center of a relationship. Do you know what happens when problems, fears, and frustrations become the center of a relationship? It creates problems, fears, and frustrations. Like a proof text that just starts walking itself out. I remember I got home from work one day and I just walked into the house, and I've been thinking about this, and I was like, Amber, that's my wife, I was like, we need to be able to talk with one another about the fears and problems that we have. That's really important, and I want to be there for you. But I also want to know you. We also need to be able to talk about each other and connect on things that aren't those things and stuff outside of this. I think we need to spend more time connecting on who we are and loving one another and what this looks like and all that. And she just looked at me, and she'd been reading and thinking and praying about her own stuff, and came in and was like, and I actually think the same thing. I think the same thing too. And so we started to just shift that a little. I still watch the news. I still read all the things. I still talk with my wife about some of those things, but it's not the central piece of what we're talking about. It's not the center of our relationship. It's not the center of what makes that good and beautiful anymore. You know what gets to be? God. God gets to be. The love he flows through us, the relationship he's given to us, those pieces. And it has been like a breath of fresh air at a time where you could feel Eden drying up a little bit. Do you know what I mean? It's been an absolute gift. Now, I don't know where you are. I don't know what your world looks like. I don't know what your relationships look like. But if I were to ask you, in the very real life that you are living right now, in your very real relationships, in your very real workplaces, as you even think about the world and things around you, can I just ask you, when it comes to your life, what's become the center of your garden? Think about that for just a moment. For you, what's become the center of your garden? And I want to say this, if it's a political party, you're in for a wild ride. If it's everything that's constantly happening in the world around you, if that's your center, you're in for a roller coaster that's going to make you sick at some point in time. If it's all the problems and all the things that you deal with at work, and that's it, that's all there is to it, you're in for a world of tumultuousness and a world of hurt and a world of swirl that comes with it. But if life with God, our God who is our refuge, who is our strength, who is with us, who is for us, who's in the center like a tree with deep planted roots in the midst. If life with God is actually the thing that anchors you, if God is like that tree with those deep roots in the center of your garden, then you will find an anchor that holds you and protects you and gives you strength while everything else swirls, friends. This is what the psalmist is trying to get us to see. The city stands strong, though the nations topple and rise and fall and things go crazy. That's my prayer for you. That's my prayer for your relationships. It's my prayer for your own heart. It's my prayer for our anxiousness. It is my hope. Because when you hold that, do you know what starts to happen? We get to spend more time living here and less time stuck here, right? All right, I want to take us to the last piece here. One final look at how the psalmist ends this passage. And to be honest, this was the whole thing that made me so excited to teach this psalm, because I love this. Psalm 46, verse 8 through 11. He says, come. He shifts now, right? He was talking about the natural world, and then he was talking about, okay, here's the nations. And now he actually says, gives us a challenge. And the point of a psalm is not to give you challenges. This is not a sermon. It's a song, and yet he does. There's these beautiful challenges that are in this song, which I love. He says, come, behold the works of the Lord and how he has brought desolations on the earth. He makes wars cease to the end of the earth. He breaks the bow, shatters the spear. He burns the chariots with fire. He stands bigger than and above national conflicts. Verse 10, be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. I love the way the psalmist ends this passage. It's in light of the crazy natural fears that exist in the world around us that we can't control because it feels chaotic. Yeah, in light of all the national and global and all the other things that exist in the world around us that feels like it's kind of chaotic. In light of all of that, then he says, do this. And we're like, please, just tell me what to do, because that seems crazy. The world feels like it's spinning. What do I do? And he goes, just come and behold what the Lord has done. And that's the first set of instructions. If you're sitting here going, well, what's a different path I can walk forward? Because I don't know what to do. Here's step one in that path. He says, come and behold what the Lord has done, which in the Hebrew is literally just come and see what God did. Which for us, it's this, pause and look at what God has done. Pause and look at what God has done. Verse 8 says, behold the works of the Lord. And he says this to this very Jewish audience. And they would have looked and said, he led us out of Egypt. He set us free when we thought we were condemned to slavery with no way out. He led us into freedom. He parted the waters. He led us through the desert. In times where we were so scared that we didn't have food and water, he provided for us. In places when we didn't have direction, he guided us. In moments where we felt like we had insecurity and everything was crazy around us, he anchored us. He's grown us and developed us as a nation. And even more than that, there's the personal side. And here's the way I've seen him. And here's how he has loved me. And here's what this has done in my life and in my heart. And then they can look at their ancestors and be like, my fathers and my mothers and my grandfathers and my grandmothers. And you see this larger story that unfolds. Don't lose your story. When you're staring at a problem and all you stare at is the problem, your whole world becomes a problem. Sometimes you lose your story in that because your story becomes the problem. And when you just stop and you look up for just a moment, you realize, wait, this is my moment, but there's a larger story that's been unfolding and been told, and I'm missing that. I've lost my story. And this is the psalmist saying, get your story back. Look around you. See what God has done. Friends, if you looked up from that problem in your relationship you're facing, if you looked up from that crisis at work that has you fearful or nervous, if you looked up from that difficult moment in your life that currently unsettles you, if you looked up from your news feed, if you looked up from your social media, if you looked up from your television screen, if you looked up from whatever it is that has you preoccupied and living out of here and not here, if you looked up from that moment, what would you see? If you looked up to see all that God has done and to see who he is, friends, who is God to you? And what have you seen him do? If you look up and ask yourself that question, what comes to mind for you? Is it the moment that you first realized that you were unconditionally loved? That it wasn't just a nice idea, but that there was something like an anchor that exists in this world called the love of God that is for you, and that nothing can separate you from it, and you got to just be washed in that? Is it that? Is it the moment in your past when you walk through valleys and shadows and you thought you were alone, and yet somehow in the midst of a really hard time, you just knew God was with you and you felt like you weren't alone, and there was a strength to lean on and a kindness in the midst of it? Is it the moment that you just prayed because you needed someone, you needed that conversation, you needed that coffee shop, you needed those words, and you needed that moment? And God just dropped somebody right in the middle of that for you. Somebody showed up for you in a way that looked and loved like Jesus. What is it for you? Maybe it's your personal moments. Maybe it's the story that's been told through your family members if you come through generations of this. Maybe it's brothers and sisters, fathers and mothers, grandparents and great-grandparents and so on, of this larger story that has been unfolding that you're now a part of the work of God and all the things that he's doing in you and through you. What's that larger story? Grab a hold of it. Look up from this long enough to look up and see. And you know what happens? When you stare at this, it's threat, threat, threat. But when you look up, when you look back, you start to see that the world's a little bigger and you start to move from here to here. You don't lose your mind, you get your mind back. What have you seen God do? And then in verse 10, I love this because we see the second step in that path, as the writer says, okay, so he's our refuge, he's our strength, he's with us, he's for us. If you're just staring at here and you've lost your story, I want you to get your story back. I want you to look up, I want you to look back, I want you to recognize who God is and what God's doing. And you're like, okay, I've done that. I'm holding on to it. I've got all of that. Like, okay, now what? And then he goes, be still. I hate this verse. As a person with ADHD, guys, all I ever heard growing up was be still, hold still, don't move, stop talking. Like, just be, like if God was like, Ryan, you got to live your life based on being still. I'm like, oh, I am doomed. Like, this is such a hard verse for me. And I don't know if you've ever felt that way or if you've ever heard this phrase, be still and know that he is God. You're like, okay, I just have to hold still. How long? The moment you ask that question, you can tell who you are, by the way, right? That's not what this means. Can I share good news for you? If you're like me or wired like me, be still and know that he is God. It's not actually what this means. When you look at the Hebrew, here's how the Hebrew definition of be still gets to unfold. It's this. It's to grow slack. I want you to imagine a rope that's pulled so tightly and then it grows slack. It loses some of its tension. To release. And then my favorite, to let go. When our amygdala gets hijacked, when we're scared, when an enemy's there, when there's a threat in front of us, when it's threat, 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 and we start to lose our minds, and we boil everything down. We lose our minds, and suddenly we turn into fight or flight, and we just got to figure out one or these other things. We become out of our reptilian brain piece, right? That this is our base impulses, and this is what we do. And in those moments, we reach for anything that can help us. If it's fight, it's I've got to reach for a weapon. I've got to reach for a thing. I've got to hold on to this. If it's flee, then I've just got to get out of here and get rid of something and help whatever. Like, I've got to do this because you're the one who has to save yourself, because right now there's nothing but you. That's how we think. If you've ever been in a near car accident or actually been in a car accident and you gripped the steering wheel like crazy because you were just trying to get yourself out of that and then the accident was over, did you ever have that moment where you had to look at your hands and you're still holding on to the thing for dear life even though the moment's over? And it's because it was you. You had to hold on to something. You were clinging to it. And what the psalmist is saying in this moment is, you remember who God is, right? You remember that the God of all creation, who speaks order into chaos, who speaks light into darkness, the God who precedes all of this and is bigger and above than all of this, the God who lends you his strength because it's yours, the God who is your refuge, the God who is with you and he's for you. Remember that God, right? You remember that he's God? And you're like, yeah, I do. And then he says, so let go. And let him be God so you don't have to be. The job's already filled. The thing's already taken. And it's exhausting to hold it into a steering wheel with your life that tight. It'll mess with you. It'll mess with your relationships. It's not your job. Even though survival, I get it. Even though all of us are wired this way, we all have this, and yet, come back to your wise brain. Let go, be still, and know that he is God. You can let go. Friends, let go of controlling the situation. Let go of obsessing over all the details of a problem and exploring more things and trying to get as much information on all the things that you possibly can as though one day there'll be enough. Let go of being hyper vigilant and trying to predict what's around every corner so that you never get caught off guard, so that you don't have to be overtaken. Let go of managing everyone else so nothing goes wrong so that you can feel safe. Let go of running or hiding or attacking or distracting. Friends, let go. Be still and know that he is God. so that you can encounter the good news of your life, that you don't have to be God because you have God. He is with you and he is for you and he loves you. We don't have to lose our minds and live in our lizard brains. We can live in our right minds right here and right now in this very real world amidst the chaos and swirl that exists around us. We just have to be still and know that he is God. Let's pray. God, I recognize that there's probably a lot swirling in the heads and hearts of people in this room right now, or anybody joining us. And Lord, I just pray that they would sense your peace and your presence, that they would know that you are God. I pray that for myself. I pray that for all of us, God. Whatever feels big in our lives, I pray that we might know and trust your strength in us and through us. Whatever feels exhausting, Lord, I just pray for people and myself, all of us, Lord, that we would know that you are our refuge and that we would seek it and dwell in it like a garden, Lord. And I pray for all of us as we step into whatever it is that swirls around us and for us or before us, Lord, that as we go to walk through that, may we know that you are with us and that you are for us. And we pray for a kind of grounded confidence, a perfect love that casts out fear, that you would anchor our lives as we continue to step into the world around us. We love you. We praise you. In Jesus' name, amen. Friends, before you go today, my name's Ryan. I'm one of the pastors here. If you're new, I'd love to meet you. I'm going to be over in this next steps area after the service and would just love to shake your hand and say thanks for coming. If you've ever wanted to take a next step around here and you've thought, I don't know what to do, or I don't know, it's a lot to figure out myself. These wonderful individuals at these tables over here in this next steps area, they just love to help you. Like make that a little easier, even if it's just an answer or a question, whatever you might need. And then lastly, I recognize that some of what we have talked about today, you may go, I actually need some prayer in my life. Or I really am walking through something. Can I just encourage you, don't leave without letting somebody pray for you if you need that. That is a gift. There are amazing people in our prayer room that would so love to meet you in the midst of that and pray for you here this morning. It is amazing to be together with you, friends. Be still and know that he is God. We'll see you soon.